It's 1943, and a German U-boat commander is staring at his periscope in complete shock. His unsinkable submarine is being tracked by enemy ships with pinpoint accuracy, even though he's completely submerged. What he doesn't know is that the Allies have just deployed one of the most game-changing secret technologies in human history. World War II wasn't just won by courage and numbers. It was decided by an invisible war of innovation. While soldiers fought on the ground, brilliant minds in secret laboratories were racing to create weapons so advanced, so revolutionary, that they would determine who lived and who died. Today, we're diving deep into the hidden world of World War II's secret weapons, the technologies that changed everything, and some that were so terrifying they were never meant to see the light of day. Let's start with Germany's ultimate secret weapon, the Enigma Machine. Imagine trying to crack a code that changes millions of times per day. That's exactly what the Allies were facing. The Germans were so confident in Enigma that they used it for everything: troop movements, U-boat coordinates, even Hitler's personal messages. They believed it was mathematically impossible to crack. And honestly, they weren't wrong. The machine had 158 million possible settings. To put that in perspective, if you tried one setting every second, it would take you longer than the age of the universe to try them all. But here's where our story takes a dramatic turn. Deep in the English countryside at a place called Bletchley Park, a team of mathematicians, chess champions, and crossword puzzle experts were working around the clock on what would become known as the world's first programmable computer, Colossus. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a brilliant mathematician named Alan Turing. He realized that human error was the key. German operators, being human, would sometimes use predictable patterns, like starting messages with weather reports or ending with Heil Hitler. These tiny human mistakes became the crack that brought down the entire system. When the Allies finally broke Enigma, it was like having a crystal ball. They could read German battle plans before German generals in the field received them. Some historians estimate that breaking Enigma shortened the war by 2 to 4 years and saved millions of lives. But here's the kicker. The Allies had to be incredibly careful about how they used this information. If they acted on every piece of intelligence, the Germans would realize their codes were compromised. So sometimes they had to let Allied ships be sunk and cities be bombed to protect the secret. Imagine having to make that choice. While code breaking was happening in secret, another invisible technology was changing the face of warfare: radar. But radar's origin story is almost comically accidental. In the 1930s, British scientists were trying to create a death ray that could destroy enemy aircraft with radio waves. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. But during their experiments, they noticed something interesting. Aircraft were reflecting their radio signals back to them. What seemed like a failed death ray became Britain's greatest defensive weapon. During the Battle of Britain, when over 1,000 German aircraft darkened the skies over London, radar gave the outnumbered RAF a seemingly impossible advantage. They could see the Luftwaffe coming from 100 miles away, track exactly how many planes there were, their altitude, speed, and direction. Here's a mind-blowing fact. Without radar, the RAF would have needed to keep constant air patrols over all of Britain, burning through fuel and exhausting pilots. Instead, they could scramble their fighters at exactly the right moment to intercept incoming raids. It was like having superhuman vision. The psychological impact was enormous too. German pilots couldn't understand how British fighters always seemed to know exactly where they were going. Some started believing the British had supernatural powers or that there were spies everywhere. The truth was far more mundane and far more terrifying from Germany's perspective. But radar had one crucial weakness. It couldn't distinguish between friend and foe. This led to tragic friendly fire incidents and gave birth to another secret technology we'll get to in a moment. Probably the most famous secret weapon of World War II, but not in the way you might expect. Everyone knows about the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the real story of the Manhattan Project is far stranger and more complex than most people realize. It all started with a letter. In 1939, Albert Einstein wrote to President Roosevelt warning that German scientists might be developing an atomic bomb. What Einstein didn't know was that German nuclear research was actually years behind the Allies. partly because Hitler considered nuclear physics Jewish science and had driven many brilliant Jewish physicists out of Germany straight into Allied research programs. The Manhattan Project became the most expensive secret program in human history. At its peak, it employed 130,000 people across multiple secret cities that didn't appear on any maps. Workers lived in communities that officially didn't exist, working on projects they couldn't discuss, building components for a weapon most of them didn't know they were creating. Here's where it gets really wild. The project was so secret that when Harry Truman became president after Roosevelt's death, he didn't even know the atomic bomb existed until he'd been in office for weeks. But the Manhattan Project created something even more significant than the bomb itself. It demonstrated that scientific research could be industrialized. Before World War II, major discoveries usually came from individual scientists in small laboratories. The Manhattan Project showed that if you threw enough resources at a scientific problem, you could solve almost anything. The success of the atomic bomb led directly to the space race, the internet, GPS, and countless other technologies that shape our world today. In a very real sense, the modern world began in the secret laboratories of the Manhattan Project. However, there's a darker side to this story that's often overlooked. Many of the scientists who worked on the bomb, including its scientific director Robert Oppenheimer, were horrified by what they had created. After seeing the destruction in Japan, Oppenheimer famously quoted the Hindu text Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, destroyer of worlds." Here's a secret weapon that probably saved more Allied lives than any other single invention, but hardly anyone has heard of it. The proximity fuse. Before this innovation, anti-aircraft guns had to hit enemy planes directly or time their shells to explode at exactly the right moment. Imagine trying to hit a mosquito with a baseball while both of you are moving at high speed. That's essentially what gunners were attempting. The proximity fuse was revolutionary because it contained a tiny radar system that could detect when it was close to a target and automatically detonate. Suddenly, you didn't need a direct hit. Getting close was good enough. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Japanese kamikaze attacks, which had been devastatingly effective, suddenly became far less successful. American ships that had been sitting ducks became floating fortresses. But here's the fascinating part. The technology was so advanced that the Allies were terrified the Germans might capture an unexploded shell and reverse engineer it. So proximity fuses were initially only used over water, where duds would sink and be impossible to recover. It wasn't until D-Day that they were finally used over land, when the benefits outweighed the risks. The Germans actually tried to develop their own proximity fuses, but failed. Their electronics weren't miniaturized enough, and they couldn't solve the problem of making the devices rugged enough to survive being fired from a gun. It's one of those moments where superior engineering won the war as surely as any battlefield victory. Not all secret weapons were technological. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was a carefully crafted lie. Enter Operation Mincemeat, quite possibly the most audacious deception in military history. The Allies needed to invade Europe, but everyone knew they would have to come through the Mediterranean. The obvious target was Sicily. It was close to Africa where Allied forces were based, and it would give them a stepping stone to mainland Italy. The problem was, it was so obvious that the Germans had heavily fortified the island. British intelligence came up with a plan so bizarre, it sounds like something from a spy novel. They would create a fake British officer, complete with a detailed backstory, and have him accidentally wash up on a Spanish beach carrying fake invasion plans. They started with a homeless man who had died from rat poison, dressed him in a military uniform, and created an entire fake identity. Major William Martin of the Royal Marines became a real person, complete with love letters from his fiancée, theater tickets, and even an overdraft notice from his bank. The fake documents he carried suggested the Allies were planning to invade Greece and Sardinia, not Sicily. The Spanish authorities, who were neutral but German-friendly, did exactly what the Allies hoped. They copied the documents and passed them to German intelligence. Hitler himself saw the documents and was convinced. He ordered massive reinforcements sent to Greece and Sardinia, leaving Sicily relatively undefended. When the Allies actually invaded Sicily, they faced far lighter resistance than expected. A single dead homeless man had fooled the most paranoid dictator in history and potentially saved thousands of Allied lives. It's a reminder that in warfare, sometimes the most powerful weapon is imagination. But not all secret weapons made it to the battlefield. The war ended with laboratories full of technologies so advanced or so terrifying that they remained classified for decades. The Germans were working on guided missiles that could cross the Atlantic and hit New York. They had prototypes of stealth aircraft that were invisible to radar. There were plans for orbital weapons platforms and even primitive computers that could control entire defensive networks. The Allies had their own terrifying projects. Beyond the atomic bomb, they were developing biological weapons, chemical agents that could destroy entire crop harvests, and psychological warfare techniques that could drive enemy populations insane. Perhaps most chilling of all were the German experiments with nerve agents, chemicals so deadly that a single drop could kill dozens of people. Thankfully, Hitler was reportedly so traumatized by his experience with poison gas in World War I that he refused to authorize their use. These weapons remind us that World War II wasn't just fought between armies, it was fought between entire scientific communities. The outcome was determined as much in laboratories as on battlefields. The secret weapons of World War II didn't just win a war, they created the modern world. The computer you're watching this on, the GPS in your phone, the internet itself, all trace their origins back to wartime research programs. But perhaps the most important lesson is that innovation thrives under pressure. When humanity's future was at stake, scientists and engineers accomplished the impossible. They split atoms, saw through darkness, and created machines that could think. The question is, what impossible things could we accomplish today if we brought that same urgency to challenges like climate change, disease, or poverty? The secret weapons of World War II proved that there's no problem too complex to solve when brilliant minds work together toward a common goal. The only question is, what will we choose to make possible? What secret weapon from World War II surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden stories from history. Until next time, keep questioning everything you think you know about the past, because the truth is always more incredible than fiction.